I am the chess strategist, and today we're going to win another chess game. Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be playing another 10+5 rapid game. In yesterday's game we had an interesting one where our opponent played d4 on move 1 and we were able to eke out a win. They played a very interesting strategy involving f3 and trying to force e4, but they did it with a little bit less tempo than they should have, and we ended up getting a win in that game. So today we're going to play another 10+5 game, and I hope you guys enjoy it. And we've been getting the black pieces a lot of times, so I would like to see another game with the white pieces, maybe a one where our opponent plays something else in e4, maybe a Sicilian or a Caro-Kann. We could show you guys that. And yeah, today we are getting the white pieces again. And we're going to start with e4. Let's see what our opponents go with. And our opponent has gone for e5, the principled response that we always get. So we're going to go with knight f3. And our opponent decides to go with the very interesting queen f3 move. Queen f3 not being a move that is very common. And yeah, I think that there's a few different ways we can approach this position. One that's interesting is just playing d4. Play d4 immediately. Our opponent hasn't created any pressure against our pawn here. Hasn't defended his pawn properly as well. We could just attack the center with d4. And I really like that idea. Just attacking his pawn in the center. And we can develop our knight to the center of the board as well. One response we may get is bishop to c5 here. An interesting idea, of course. Hoping that we move our knight away and he's able to play checkmate, which we wouldn't want to allow, of course. Another thing we can do is maybe throw in the intermezzo, bishop to g5. That's an interesting move to throw in here. I'm not so sure about it though. We could just take with the knight for now. And we can develop our bishop if our opponent plays bishop to c5, which of course they do. And our opponent continues to create more pressure on our knight, which is fine. I'm perfectly fine to just play a defensive move like c3, and we can develop our knight many ways. Also just go out to f3, where it's usually a well-placed piece. Knight on f3 is always well-placed, usually. Not always, but pretty much it's very likely to be well-placed on a square like f3, where it's creating a lot of pressure. And it's actively placed towards the center. Here our opponent has moved his queen away and is deciding to attack these two pawns. We wouldn't want to allow him taking this pawn by moving our bishop. So what we're going to do is probably develop our queen to this square here on f3. The queen on f3 is a nice square. It is creating pressure like this. It's defending this pawn, and it's going to allow our bishop to go to c4 with tempo. Our opponent seems like he wants to trade queens. He also might just want to take on here, on this square. And we can just repeat here. We don't need to entertain our opponent's idea. We can just repeat. See if we can force a deviation. We can repeat once. Always repeat once. If your opponent moves their pieces back to where the square that they came from, just repeat once. You don't have to repeat again. Of course, if you repeat too many times, it will be a draw, but you don't want to create a draw. You want to just repeat once, and our opponent decides that he's just going to repeat once. He's not going to go multiple times. And we can develop our bishop now. Where does our bishop want to go? Well, our bishop can go to a few different squares. C4 is always a nice square to go to. I think that would be quite prudent. I think another option could be just the mild bishop e2. Another idea I'm quite fond of is just playing this nice move b4 here and following up with a5. That's always a good option. Let's just do it. Opponent wants to exchange pieces in the center of the board. We don't want to take with the pawn here because it would leave this pawn hanging. So we want to just take with the bishop here. And here we do get the two center pawns, which I'm fine with. We get two center pawns. We've got excellent control. Our opponent doesn't have any of that. And we can develop our queen to f3 as well. I'm thinking if we develop our queen to f3, our opponent is going to play the move bishop to g4, which would force our queen to a different square, most likely back to e3. So maybe we play a more careful move here. One that doesn't allow him to play with as much tempo. We're just going to develop our queen to this nice d3 square. Notice what we have gained from this. We've gained this nice open C file, which we can use for our rook. And here our opponent is playing rather oddly, deciding to put his queen back on f6, restricting his knight's development. I think this is an odd move. And we can just do a number of things. We can develop our bishop. We can develop our knight. We want to develop our pieces with tempo. I also want to be able to meet bishop g4 with f3. I want to play the move f3, knocking away the bishop here. So I think that's the move we're going to go for. We're going to wait to play f3 until he's played bishop g4. And here he's just trying to strike and on the side, the center of the board with c5, a flank attack to try to exploit this pin. This pawn is pinned, and we don't want to allow him to just do something like that. He's exploiting the fact that our pieces have not been developed yet. But it's alright, we can just develop our pieces. We can use this time that he's using to try to win pawns to just develop our pieces actively and have a strong position. So one thing I like here, we can always go for this advance e5. Interesting pawn advance. Go for the advance e5. If he takes, we just take here. And yes, our center has been dissipated, but we trade pawns evenly and we're able to just develop. And that is what he goes for. So he's flank attacked us and we counterattacked in the center. That's a very common theme in chess. We're just going to develop our bishop here. He has a few different moves here. One's just castling, simple. The other one is going for this interesting advance pawn e4. He doesn't go for pawn e4. Pawn e4 I think would have been more critical, recreating the attack on the knight as well as, or on the rook, as well as attacking our queen with tempo. Here he decides to attack the rook with tempo, or attack the pawn over here with tempo, and again, I'm not too worried about it. We can just move our queen over to the side of the board. Our queen was going to be vulnerable on that square to an attack, but here I am worried about this response bishop e6. So we want to be a little bit careful. We don't want to allow this pawn to hang. We also don't want our pieces to be misplaced. So one thing we can do is put a rook on this nice nice b1 square. First of all, it's defending the pawn. It's also supporting an advance of b5, which we may want to go for, and it's getting itself off of the line of fire of the queen here. We don't want the rook on the line of fire. So I think this is a nice multi-purpose move. Notice here we can just block this attack with our knight. It's not too big of a deal. This pin is something I did notice, but or this skewer, but it's really not that big of a deal. Notice how we are attacking the queen because we are creating an attack with tempo. If we took the queen, it would be with check. He'd have to take back, and then we'd win. And here he completely misses this tactic. This is a tactic that's very important. You want to make sure you assess all the captures in the position, and you make sure you can't do them with check. And this is a capture with check. So we capture his queen with check. He has to take back, and we get we get queen for a piece, and then we also win our piece back. And he is resigned. And these are some tactics you need to notice in your games too. Tactics where there's a few different captures, but one comes with check. If you play the one with check, you may be able to win a piece in an interesting version. So let's do the analysis here. We get e4, e5, very common, knight f3, and our opponent goes with this very interesting move, queen to f6. Very odd move. Usually knight f6 is played or knight c6 is played, but we decide just to attack the center with d4. d4 is a nice move. There's a few other moves you can play, bishop c4, knight c3. A lot of these moves are very advantageous for white, but we go for d4, very central approach, and we take, allowing our opponent to just get his pieces out in a more, cavalier fashion. He gets a strong attack on our center. We repeat one time, and we advance our pawn. Opponent trades in the center of the board, and he trades off a lot of pieces, giving us these two center pawns, and the position is equal. And actually, the opponent says, or the computer says, it's actually maybe slightly favored for black, but it's not too big of an advantage it would matter. We decided to develop our queen, and he keeps wasting time. He's moving his queen back and forth, and we just decided to keep developing our pieces. Our opponent goes for this interesting move, exploiting the pin, and we notice immediately that we cannot take like this. it would be hanging our rook. We'd advance in the center, and we make an exchange of pieces. It's interesting. And apparently here, this e4 move would have been devastating for us. It would have given him back equality, which he didn't have before he was behind. But we allowed it, and we just moved our rook over. Our opponent could have castled, but he decided to go for this bishop f5 move, which we can parry with knight to e4. And we see the position is equal here, but just a simple move like rook over just blunders the whole game. I mean, we're in a very equal position, but tactics are starting to flow, and our opponent didn't notice that the queen will be captured with check. And that's the most important detail, because if he was able to capture the queen on this turn, then it would have been an excellent move for him, and it would have been probably completely equal still. But because we can capture the queen with check and then capture the hanging bishop, we're just completely winning here, and our opponent just resigns. He doesn't see a path forward, and to be honest, I don't see a path forward either. It's going to be very easy to clean up this position. We're going to castle, put our rook on the open file, try to exchange rooks. We're going to win a whole bunch of free pawns with our queen, which is just such a strong piece. And yeah, I think this is a game that's kind of like a forewarning for hasty moves and making sure you assess all the captures, because he may have been thinking, oh yeah, this knight is pinned, it can't move, he has to respond to the attack on his queen. But he doesn't see that this knight can move as long as it's with check, and of course we can capture with check. The other thing is just like, you know, you gotta assess whenever your queen is under attack, and his queen was under attack in that position, in this position as well. This position, the queen is still under attack. It's still going to be captured by check, and he didn't properly assess that threat. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope this game serves as sort of a cautionary tale to assess all the different moves in the position, and really just notice, hey, you know, we can't allow him to capture with check, because when you capture with check, you gain a tempo over your opponent, and we can do things like this. Instead of going queen for queen, I get his queen, and I get an extra piece in exchange, so we just get a full queen. There's no exchange of pieces. So yeah, I hope you guys really enjoyed that video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.